We start with a man being shot and beaten and left in a ditch covered by cardboard. The next day, we have Jack Reacher walking to a town named Margrave, Georgia, and sees a man roasting his girl. Reacher stares at him and intimidates the man to rethink his action. The man apologizes and leaves. Reacher is in a diner, but right before he tries the pie, he is stopped by police and arrested for a crime. Chief Detective Oscar Finley brings Reacher to an empty room to ask Reacher some questions. Reacher doesn't say anything at first. Finally, he says something, but to deny the crime he is accused of, and how the victim was taken down. Due to Reacher being the prime suspect, he was put in the hole. Finley and Roscoe Conklin visits Paul Hubble because his cell phone number was found at the crime scene. A black sedan shows up by Hubble's house and Hubble admits to the crime, but Finley doesn't believe Hubble. They bring Hubble and lock him up. Finley tells Reacher to go with him, but Reacher denies because he wants his zip ties off before going. Reacher thinks Dwight Stevenson might have something related to Hubble due to the longer eye contact and profiles Finlay to show his intelligence. Finlay calls Stevenson to his office and Reacher both questions Stevenson. Stevenson explains that they had a family gathering and Hubble was there, so there should be no way for Hubble to commit the crime. So Finlay sends Reacher and Hubble to jail to scare Hubble into giving up some information. At the jail site, Officer Tanner Spivey tries to strip search Reacher, but Reacher denies him due to his knowledge about the law and guns, and threatens Spivey if he still wants to try. Reacher and Hubble were sent to Gen Pop. JD and his men show up to take Hubble's item and was about to get some head, but Reacher stepped up and established himself as Top G, not to be messed with. Hubble explains to Reacher what he is forced to do, and if Hubble crosses the mastermind, he will be nailed to the wall in front of his family. They go to a shower room to lure out all the people who were sent after them. Reacher beats them all up until the guards come and move them to a safer location. Reacher suspects that Spivey set them up. In the morning, they were both freed and Roscoe picked up Reacher. It was all thanks to Roscoe to get them free so quick. Ever since Kleiner came to the town 5 years ago and set up his company at Margrave, dealing with real estate, trucking, chemicals, and mechanical parts, in exchange, Kleiner got a sweet deal for some land and Kleiner pours money into the town. Kleiner has a son named KJ, and KJ warns Reacher to watch his back. Reacher was going to go on a date with Roscoe, but a dead body was found, so the date was cancelled. And Reacher wanted to leave, but Finley demands Reacher to help with the investigation. We find out that Reacher's brother was the first victim. Reacher states,
I guess I'll find everybody responsible and kill every last one of them.
Reacher and Roscoe investigates Hubble, but he isn't there, so Reacher makes an excuse to search the house and notices a burr on Hubble's shoes. Reacher theorizes the attacker in jail were after the wrong guy and attacked Reacher because he was wearing sunglasses and Hubble wasn't wearing anything. They go to Joe's crime scene to see if the burr grows there, and then they reenact what happened at the crime scene. At the same night, another death happened. We find out it was Police Chief Morrison who was taken out. Reacher remembers what Hubble told him and asks if Morrison was nailed to the wall, and he was. Reacher assumes Morrison was a dirty cop and he was taken out to be made as an example if they mess up. At the town hall meeting, Mayor Teal decides to make himself chief of police and the people get heated. Accusations were tossed around, mainly at Reacher, but Kleiner vouched for Reacher because he had an alibi. Reacher thinks Teal and Kleiner are dirty and gets Finley to get protection for Hubble's family. So Finley asks Picard, who is in FBI, to help. Mosley warns Reacher that 2 Spanish men are looking for him. Reacher tries to set up Spivey, but Spivey knows, so he gets 2 Spanish men to take him in, but Reacher fights back. They pull out their knives and continue fighting until police shows up and they all run off. Reacher goes back to where Finley and Roscoe are at and explains the situation to them. Roscoe tells Reacher that Joe works for the Secret Service and they head out to a bar to have their date. After a dance at the bar, it starts pouring and they go to a motel to stay the night. In the morning, they head back to Roscoe's place and notice someone has broken in. There wasn't anyone there anymore, but a carving of "See you soon," and Reacher says,
I'm really gonna need a gun.
Roscoe lends Reacher her family's precious Desert Eagle. Before leaving, Reacher tests the gun and gives a speech.
Never trust a weapon you haven't personally test fired.
Jasper ID'd the second victim as Pete Jobling, working as a trucker. They find it odd that a fancy firm defended Pete for a traffic violation turned to disorderly conduct. Molly Beth Gordon from Secret Service calls Roscoe and they tell Molly that Joe is dead. And Molly tells them that Joe was working for the anti-counterfeiting department. So Roscoe pretends to listen to Teal's order. Finley visits Spivey to find no one, but a call log is calling Kleiner. The neighbor calls the cop on Finley, and Finley was taken in after getting knocked out. Roscoe had to bail Finley out from another county. Reacher visits the firm to get information on Pete. They meet up at a BBQ place to relay the information they found. They find Kleiner very suspicious because all the information leads to him, so they pay Kleiner a visit. As they walk in, Reacher notices deer heads hang up, so they must have a skilled marksman. Kleiner explains why he helped Pete with legal fees and gets under Finley's skin, but Finley isn't having it and fires back with threats, and Kleiner asks them to leave. Reacher tells them,
I'm gonna uncover this whole operation, then burn it to the ground.
because he had a lot of free time to do it. KJ tells Roscoe why Reacher was let go because he took out a couple of civilians in Baghdad, and Roscoe refused to listen. Finley learns that Hubble wasn't working at the currency department for a whole year. Reacher finds out that Spivey skipped town with 2 Spanish men. Reacher notices that he's being followed, so he sets them up and takes them out before the Spanish men do. After taking them out, Reacher cleans his mess and finds Spivey in the back of their trunk. They meet up at a ditch where a burned SUV was hidden, and they deducted that it might have been Joe's car. Reacher tells Roscoe what happened in Baghdad, where a couple of adults were beating the kids that Reacher see every day. And Reacher gives the adults some options, but they chose to seek revenge. Reacher was ready for the ambush and took them out quickly. They go to the airport to ditch the bodies there, but before leaving, Reacher is fixated about the animal feed. At the hotel, Reacher fortifies the room, and Molly calls him to give them some information. They visit Pete's place and find an empty aircon box, and Reacher thinks that the counterfeit money comes from South America, and Pete brings it to Margrave. Picard gives them information about where Joe stayed. When they reach the motel, they find out that someone beat them to it, but Reacher believes that Joe is smarter than that and may leave the info somewhere else. When they find the info, they're shot at. They try to escape the gunman, but Reacher uses himself as bait to keep Roscoe safe. Reacher heads into an abandoned building, and the car gets trapped, so Reacher takes one of the gunmen out before running away again and attacking the other gunman. The gunman gets the upper hand and aims his gun at Reacher, but Roscoe comes in to save the day and takes out the gunman. They meet up at a farmhouse to decode Joe's note, and then they start calling the numbers. Reacher thinks that the animal feed is still linked after calling the numbers, and he calls Neagley because he trusts her with his life and tells her to research the things that he needed. They go meet Molly at the train station, but she goes missing. Reacher sees her briefcase on the tracks and finds her dying there from a stab wound.
Reacher, Finley, and Roscoe exits the train station without obtaining anything. Regrettably, after calling the police, they had to leave Molly, who is bleeding out. They couldn't be held accountable or linked to this after all. They stop at the dog's owner's home on the way back, and Reacher sees the dog laying on his side in the yard. Reacher ultimately loses his furry because it's obvious that the new owner doesn't care for him. After giving the man a blow to the nose, he locks him up and takes the dog with him to a no-kill shelter. Reacher is bearing the weight of the world on his shoulders because Joe and Molly are both dead. On the way out of town, he passes by the farm and wonders why there is so much animal feed there. Reacher notices the same burr on the ground that was on Paul's shoes. Reacher stops by KJ's table at the diner in an attempt to acquire some answers. KJ gets bitch slapped to the face as retaliation for his issue after some angry comments said about Roscoe. But as Finley and Roscoe approaches with gun drawn, Kleiner arrives. Unfortunately, Earl, the owner of the diner, accuses Reacher of starting the fight, while Teal fires Roscoe for fumbling the files and lying. The problem is Kleiner won't file a complaint because doing so will draw attention to his own company. Reacher summarizes that the gun box given to Roscoe may hold the key to the case. They discover a key after checking the box out, which directs them to Mosley the barber, because a man growing bald shouldn't require a weekly visit to the barber, right? It turns out that Gray had kept a box of documents on this investigation for Roscoe. In the files, Reacher finds it weird that they have 116 cattle. This then results in the production of animal feed. Now with that odd number, it would allow all the animal feed to be brought in without raising any suspicions. When the number of cattle reaches to 120, it will get checked out by the state authorities. All of these donations to the community appears to be used as leverage against the residents. After all, if you bought their devotion, they would have to keep quiet or risk losing funding. Roscoe wonders why Margrave, but Margrave appears to be a wonderful location for distribution because it is connected to at least 6 different states. They may exploit this to evade any police activities. They also understood that Gray was murdered and did not do self-deletion. Reacher tells Roscoe to control her rage as they leave. Neagley calls to say that she has important information, once more speaking in code for Reacher to overhear so he can tell it to her. It turns out that JW on Joe's note was actually Jimmy Dupree Waltz, an EPA inspector, but he was shot dead inside his house. Given that the murder weapon had a silencer and that nothing was taken from his house, the FBI concluded that it was a random robbery. Seems a little fishy though. The post-mortem beating of the body is consistent with what happened to Joe. The pieces are now starting to fit together. Additionally, a Memphis police officer named McCoy found discrepancies with JD's case as well. In fact, he was investigating it through studies on harmful pollutants. In any case, when Reacher brings up the animal feed, Neagley thinks it's strange having so much animal feed too. This is why Reacher likes Neagley. At the coroner's office, Roscoe looks through Gray's files and pulls up the image of his head, in particular the one that shows the laceration. Although it is said that he hurt his head because of being severely intoxicated, but it is possible that he was struck by a blunt object. Zooming in reveals the micro lacerations, and Jasper thinks it kinda looks like a diamond. If we recall, Teal happens to use a diamond as a cane. So when Roscoe arrives at the station, she promptly punches him in the face, and Finley had to drag Roscoe out of the building. Roscoe must remain covert for the time being, since if she stays in town, she will surely be arrested. Roscoe steps in to take care of Charlie and the children as a result of it. Meanwhile, Neagley and Reacher encounters a few police officers, among them is O'Coin, and are able to acquire the moniker The Viking. Neagley and Reacher talks to Finley in the police cruiser, and Finley decides to conduct an unauthorized search. Extreme times demand for even more extreme tactics. In relation to that, it turns out that the police working alongside O'Coin is dishonest, and after finally shooting O'Coin, cries out that it would be a clean death. Neagley and Reacher retaliate by kicking the metal screen onto the officer's back, forcing him to drive off the road into the lake. The officer acknowledges that he has been intimidated into submission by dangerous people as the water starts seeping in, but other than that, he is at a loss for words. While Neagley and Reacher manages to escape and return to land, Neagley makes the decision to investigate the Viking further and learn what they know. Finley enters Kleiner's office after hours in the dark to search, but he comes upon Kleiner, who had his neck cut, as he makes his way to the office. Finley guesses he isn't in control of the levers now after all, because he's dead. Reacher studied the image of Kleiner's wounds that Finley was able to collect. The wounds appear to have been caused by a hitman from Venezuela. Reacher speculates that Kleiner was killed because the big boss was dissatisfied with his work. Teal manages the police station calls and writes a statement for the media. When Finley arrives, KJ does too, and he starts throwing punches right away. He is obviously upset and thinks Finley murdered his father. Because of this, Teal orders Finley to be quiet and stop looking into things while he handles KJ. That's not at all suspicious to bench Finley off the case. Roscoe goes up to see Charlie and the girls, but Charlie is a disaster, unpredictable, and obviously paranoid. Picard leaves after making a vow to get in touch afterwards. Reacher acquires a van to maintain his secrecy as Finley and Reacher embarks on a stakeout. They watch Kleiner's warehouse side by side as we discover more about Finley's past. It turns out his wife passed away, so he didn't have a broken marriage or a divorce. The agonizing recollection of his wife were too much for him to handle, so he fled Boston because it was a reminder of how he failed her. Kleiner's nephew Dawson is seen at the warehouse getting ready for another delivery in less than 24 hours following the passing of Kleiner. They are alarmed by this as well, so they follow after him. Dawson checks into a motel to get some rest, which gives Finley and Reacher the opportunity to sneak into the truck and discover what he's hiding. The truck is empty though, which means he's not sending money abroad. Reacher calls William from Joe's contact, who sadly has already passed away this morning from a mugging. They are able to reach Professor Castillo, and Reacher gives her orders if she wants to live. Reacher rushes over there to prevent the hitman from approaching her since it appears that they haven't gotten to her yet. The safe house is now in jeopardy after Roscoe notices a light and urges Charlie to gather the children to escape. Roscoe goes outside to check, but she made some noise alerting the hitman, so she yells at Charlie to run for it. Thankfully, Roscoe shoots the man using a grenade and some stressful, nerve-wracking diversion strategies in the wood to halt the two hitmen. Roscoe calls Charlie to come out and they hike to a diner to meet with Picard. When they got to the diner, Charlie verifies that she was aware that Paul was in trouble. One day, Kleiner urges Paul to accompany him to Venezuela so they can meet one of his clients. Kleiner makes him a tempting offer for 4x his previous salary and includes a huge bonus. Also, he will only need to work a limited amount of time. The fact is that everything there was a trap because Kleiner has Paul's information and documentation of transaction, so he is forced to work there in this field whether he likes it or not. Getting Paul to transfer those funds was actually money laundering to the highest degree. Then he is made to see the crucifixion of another man in front of him to show him how serious they are. Reacher pretends to be Castillo's attorney while wearing a suit. She acknowledges that she and Joe were working together when he meets her at the station. The professors were assisting the agents globally against mass undetectable counterfeiting. Joe notices that Georgia was where the super bills were being produced. Reacher feels a chill going down his back and realizes he's got everything backward. It turns out that the money is actually being made in the US and sent to Venezuela. Realizing the significance of this, Reacher approaches Lieutenant Diaz outside and asks him to assist in keeping her safe but off the record. Diaz agrees to help, and when Reacher leaves, he spots someone following him. Reacher makes a run for it to an alley and fights the attacker by surprise attack. When that doesn't work, he tries to get the upper hand until he whips out his tie to fight. He beats him by strangling the attacker with the tie while he dangles off of it. Once the fight is over, Reacher goes back to the group. Reacher lands in Atlanta and is met by Finley at the airport. Reacher wears a funny t-shirt that is better than wearing a white shirt stained with blood and admits to Finley that he was playing hangman with an assassin. Additionally, he informs Finley that there might be another dishonest official operating behind the scenes that they are unaware of, because Joe should have locked down the paper that creates the bills. Stevenson was concerned and contemplating leaving the town with his partner Emma because Emma is expecting. She believes they should leave and start over. Unfortunately, the previous black truck showed up with 4 men wearing latex suits and a crowbar inside. After a quick appearance at Kleiner's funeral, they pick up Hubble's car from the mechanic, but Reacher notices the mechanic using cat litter for an oil spill. The two are taken to an awful site at the Stevensons' home. Stevenson and Emma were both killed while they are chained to a chair facing each other. This murder is unique because Emma was tormented in front of Stevenson due to the placement of mirrors all around them, which suggested that someone assumed Stevenson knew something, but he didn't. Teal decides to dismiss Finley from his position because he is useless. The last officer in the station, Officer Baker, who Reacher doubts is a good officer. So he tests Officer Baker at the diner and tells him he's going to turn Hubble's house upside down to get some info. Also, Reacher thinks Finley is the cause of the murders considering he was in Margrave the entire time when these murders were happening. Reacher breaks into Hubble's house that evening to set up for a break-in, but first he needs to get some clothes because the joking t-shirt won't do it. Reacher starts painting his face to camouflage and sets out. Reacher kills the driver first, and luckily the driver wasn't able to make any noise when struggling. Then Reacher flashes the headlight to get one of them to check it out. When the intruder checks the car, Reacher attacks him at the back to end his life. Then he silently sneaks inside and quickly kills the intruder, but before dying he makes some noise alerting the last 2 intruders. One of them follows Reacher's footprint, which lead to a closed door. When he opens the door, it was just his shoes and Reacher snuck behind him, ending his life. Dawson shows up shortly afterwards shooting at Reacher, but he uses the man as a human shield. Then they engage in close combat while Dawson uses his crowbar. Reacher is knocked into the pool, and when he regains consciousness, they continue their fight. Luckily, Reacher is able to reach for his gun, ending Dawson's life with multiple shots. Reacher calls Roscoe after the battle to inform her what he found out. It turns out the US dollars are all the same size, and when combined with Paul's clever accounting, he learned that he had been providing Kleiner with steady supplies of fresh $1 notes from cash-intensive businesses like casino and payday loans. After that, these notes would be delivered to Margrave from all around the nation. To return to the animal feed, Kleiner Chemicals appears to have created a method to remove the ink off the bills. Animal feed is the main element in these notes, which are then stripped of their original painting after being washed off, battered, and reprinted to resemble a conventional $100 bill, a large-scale fraud scheme. Then, the bills will be sent to Venezuela overseas. Reacher goes to Jobling's garage because it appears that there may be some info about this. He informs Finley before going, but Finley spots 3 men coming toward his room from the outside. Finley is able to avoid the men by following Reacher's direction and sprinting off into his car to safety. He shoots the attacker's tires to ensure he won't be followed. Reacher and Finley arrives at Jobling's home, discovering it has been burnt down. Joe's notes send them to Jobling's other address, which belongs to his parents. The same box is inside the garage, but these ones are filled to the top with $100 bills. They hit the jackpot and call Picard to meet at the farmhouse to get him to shut down the operation. Neagley reveals to Reacher that the Viking has been dead for some time, and his partner is still alive and working. We find out the Viking is Picard actually. Reacher sees KJ, Teal, and Picard all aiming at him and Finley when he finally catches up with Finley, and they have stepped into a trap. Reacher was threatened with a gun, 3 against 2, with the odds stacked against them. It turns out Picard was lured in by the money in this counterfeiting job, and to make matters worse, Roscoe is being held as a hostage. Their demands are recorded through Roscoe while KJ is holding the phone. If Paul isn't returned to KJ, he'll treat Roscoe, Charlie, and the kids the same way as he treated Morrison. Turns out the Coast Guard blockade is the root of the problem. Reacher assumes Kleiner was murdered by the Venezuelans, but it turns out KJ murdered his own father, imitating the Venezuelans, making it appear that they have done it. Additionally, KJ paid Picard's partner to kill the Memphis agent. Both Molly's and Joe's death are KJ's doing. Joe's body was also kicked by Dawson, and Morrison covered him. Reacher is instructed to find Hubble, and Picard is entrusted to keep an eye on him at all times. When Reacher and Picard are traveling, they stop at a diner where Reacher orders a peach pie for himself and determines where Hubble's location is at. Reacher determines that Paul is in Augusta, which is 2 hours away from Margrave, after consulting the map. Before leaving the restaurant, Reacher stabs a tire with a fork, causing them to come to a stop to engage in a standoff. With guns in their hands and warning from Reacher that they both must remain alive for now, Picard swears not to shoot him.
Reacher has different plans and shoots down Picard, and then departs for Augusta, where he would meet Paul. They return to the police station where Reacher uses his car to slam Baker against the cell bars and save Finley. The three gathers as much weapons and ammo as they can at this moment. Neely arrives while they are working and planning for the battle. Naturally, they go to Mosley's to make a plan to get the children Charlie and Roscoe out of Kleiner's storage facility. Reacher makes a fire to distract all the bad guys inside before the battle begins. Reacher, Finley, and Neely works together to kill as many thugs as they can, whilst Paul's mission is to get his wife and children out of the middle of the action. Hubble saves his kids while taking out a thug and then taking the kids out. Reacher goes to Charlie and Roscoe, whom he manages to free from their cuffs. Reacher gives Roscoe a gun to lead Charlie out, and then she goes back in. Picard and Finley engage in a gunfight and then a close combat fight. Finley grabs onto his gunshot wound and then slices him up on a slicer. Teal and Roscoe fight each other given what happened to Gray, and she puts an end to it by shooting him multiple times in the head, one which goes right through his eyes. Reacher is now left with KJ and engages in a gunfight, but Reacher is somehow missing his shots compared to the start, landing all his shots. KJ has a long-ass monologue while playing cat and mouse with Reacher. Reacher sets him up with noise, getting a jump on him, and leaves him to burn to death. Reacher escapes the explosion and the two quickly kiss. The next day before Reacher leaves town, Roscoe gives him her number, and Reacher tells her to become the new mayor. Then Reacher goes to meet Finley at the diner to chat and eat the infamous peach pie. Reacher thinks it's mid, and they laugh it off. Then Reacher leaves town by walking and tries to hitch a ride. Well, that's it for Reacher Season 1. If you want Season 2, comment peach pie, and if you like this video, like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.